Herzlich willkommen zu unserer Abendveranstaltung. Diejenigen von Ihnen und euch, die kein Englisch verstehen.
So welcome to our evening event. In case you don't understand English, feel free to pick up a headset at the entrance. If it's not necessary, allow me to start officially.
Welcome to the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Welcome to today's event, Rethinking the Women, Peace, Security Agenda, Feminist Peacebuilding in an Age of Backlash. Thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon, both in person and online. Your presence is all the more significant for us at a time when the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and women's rights more broadly are facing an alarming global backlash. On this day, 25 years ago, the United Nations Security Council, the most powerful UN institution, adopted Resolution 1325. This resolution established the framework that has become known as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and it was the first to recognize both the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and the critical contributions they make to establish peace and stability. And since then, 9 follow-up resolutions have expanded this agenda. And as we mark this 25th anniversary today, it is hard to ignore that today we are far from celebration. Global conflicts are escalating, and so are the threats and attacks on women and queer rights and on those who advocate for them. The latest UN Secretary-General report on the Women, Peace and Security Agenda has been published earlier this month, and it highlights alarming realities. Around 676 million women now live within 50 kilometers of deadly conflict, the highest number since the 1990s. Women and girls continue to face increasing violence, exclusion from peace processes, and lack of protection amid multiplying wars. And I think all of you have followed incidents in Al-Fashir in Sudan the last days. And not to speak of the attacks we see on the LGBTQI community, whose rights are often the first point of attack in autocratic settings. It is clear that despite the progress of the last 25 years, and there has been considerable progress, it is still clear that the gap between the promises and aspirations of gender equality in peace building and the reality on the ground is currently widening at an unprecedented speed. But as UN Women's Executive Director Sima Bahous rightly put it, women do not need more promises. They need power, they need protection and equal participation. And this makes it all the more urgent to revisit and reinvigorate the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. So therefore today we want to ask, how do we safeguard the hard-won achievements of the past 25 years when key UN member states, once strong allies and advocates, are now turning their back on the agenda, thereby emboldening others to erode the core principles of this framework? In this global environment that threatens to hollow out the transformative potential of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, we must also ask, how do we protect and advance feminist peacebuilding today? How do we ensure that the gains of the past 25 years can lay a resilient foundation for the future, one that is truly gender transformative? At the Heinrich Böll Foundation, we remain deeply and globally committed to advancing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and we challenge the structural exclusion and ignorance of women's essential contribution to durable peacebuilding. Today, mostly peace builders and actors from Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East criticize that women, peace and security is referred to mainly by numbers and fancy rhetoric. They know it better because they are pioneers in appropriating the framework in ways that better reflect local realities. Earlier this year, for example, civil society and academia networks in Latin America and the Caribbean developed a regional manifesto in an effort to outline an intersectional and decolonial feminist foreign policy agenda. With support from our offices in Paris and Mexico, this manifesto was presented on the sidelines of the 4th Ministerial Conference on Feminist Foreign Policy in Paris last week, which unfortunately also fell short in terms of inclusion and dialogue with civil society. Another current example of our work is our Think Peace publication series, which takes a feminist and human security approach to pressing foreign policy issues. We have published 2 policy papers so far, one focused on the consequences of USAID cuts on human security, and the other one formulated elements of a German Middle East policy on Gaza that really builds on international law and human security. A third publication focuses on the situation of forced disappearances and detained civilians in Russia's war against Ukraine, and it will be published in the coming weeks. And Barbara, our moderator this evening, has been writing these policy briefs, so thank you very much also for that. And we invite you to take a copy of our publications with you or to check them out online. But now it's time to hear from the experts. I and we are truly honored to have with us a group of distinguished panelists from diverse contexts who bring invaluable perspectives on how feminist approaches to peacebuilding can counter backlash and build lasting, inclusive peace. Among them is Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Nguka, who will open our event. Before I introduce her, let me briefly guide you through today's agenda. Following Phumzile's keynote speech, Barbara Mittelhammer, political analyst, consultant, and author, as I said, of our Think Peace series, will moderate the panel discussion, and afterwards we invite you to continue the exchange over snacks and drinks outside. But now let me introduce our keynote speaker. Phumzile is the former UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women between 2013 and 2021. Currently, she is the Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg and founder and leader of Mlambo Foundation, which is dedicated to the improvement of education and provides digital literacy training for educators. From 2005 to 2008, you served as Deputy President of South Africa, and before that you were Minister of Minerals and Energy, you were Deputy Minister in the Department of Trade and Industry, and you were a Member of Parliament during the first democratic government of South Africa from 94 to 96. Phumzile, very much deeply felt welcome to you, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. The leadership of Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, thank you so much for inviting me, and ladies and gentlemen, we are joining many women around the world who are also remembering this day, who are commemorating the 25 years of the Security Council Resolution 1325 of 2000. Many women are reflecting about the journey we have traveled, the modest progress that we have made, and thinking about the challenges that are still faced by women and girls. This year again, we are also remembering the adoption of the Beijing Declaration, which marks 30 years. And again, another important document and a normative instrument that also helps to highlight the challenges faced by women and provide us, like Resolution 1325, they both give us a roadmap. Resolution 3025 was the first resolution to explicitly link women, peace, and security. It highlighted the importance of women's participation in peace processes as an important to consider for sustaining the peace. It recognized the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and girls, the importance of women's participation at all levels of peace and security decision-making. It further recognized the need to protect women and girls from sexual and gender-based violence and conflict. It called for integrating of gender perspective in peacekeeping in post-conflict reconstruction and humanitarian responses. Resolution 1325 also created a possibility for further resolutions that were later adopted in the Security Council, and all of those resolutions gave us a broader dispensation that addresses women, peace, and security. Women in South Sudan, in the DRC, in Myanmar, in Afghanistan, in Colombia, in Bosnia, in Syria, in Yemen, just to name a few countries, have been able to benefit from this resolution. However, much, much more could have been done, both with the resolution as well as with the support of all the member states that voted for this resolution. We do want to honor Namibia, the country that sponsored the resolution in the year 2000. At that time, Namibia was a non-permanent member of the Security Council. I think many of you will also remember that Germany was very busy during that time organizing the member states who were to champion the passing of this resolution. In September 2000, Namibia called a meeting to prepare us for this passing of this resolution. It was electric. The hope amongst women was very high. And at that time, there was a lot of support for the advancement of gender equality. The geopolitics were quite different from what they were now. In fact, I think if we were to try and adopt the same resolution now, I leave it up to you to think what would happen. So in the last 25 years, we have seen countries try to implement. Some countries even domesticated the resolution into their own laws. We have seen many countries that have adopted national action plans, and these action plans map out the implementation of the resolution. We have also seen an outreach to younger women and a focus that ensures that peace and security and young women are also in the play. Between the years 2010 and 2015, we saw the mentioning of women and gender in peace processes and agreements rise up to a modest 11%. But because before that, that was not even possible. We've seen gender advisors in many countries. And of course, we trained a lot of women mediators around the world. Sadly, very few of them were used effectively. We have an oversupply, in fact, of women peace mediators. Countries that were in conflict also collaborated with sister countries around the world, and in many international fora, women around the world spoke with one voice on issues of women, peace, and security. But we have seen that despite all of these changes, we just have not been where we were meant to be. In fact, the marking of this day, October 31, at the United Nations, at the Security Council, it is one of the highly attended events of the Security Council. When we mark this day, all member states participate. The Security Council is full to the extent that people literally stand. But when you look at that show of support and what these countries go out to do when they live here, indeed, it is disappointing. A large part of the frustration that has been expressed by women peace builders is also rooted in the disconnect between the ambitious rhetoric and the actual implementation. The global community has repeatedly committed to ensuring women's participation in conflict prevention, resolution, and recovery, and upholding their rights during war. However, recent years, we definitely have seen stagnation and regression. One key factor undermining the progress is the escalating backlash against women's rights overall. Another factor is that the crucial tools that advances support for WPS, even within the United Nations, has been significantly reduced. And of course, we have seen an increase in militarization as resources that would otherwise go to development and to support to the agenda such as that of women, peace and security has declined, the support for it has declined. We also have seen an erosion of international law and a halt of multilateral cooperation that puts a dent on the work that could be done on women, peace and security. Today, as we speak, more than 600 women and girls live within 50 kilometers of a deadly conflict. So the journey of 25 years has brought us here. We would not have imagined that Gaza would be what it is today, 25 years ago. The passing of that resolution was to give us a safer and a better world. We would not have imagined that Sudan would be what it is today. We would not have imagined that Ukraine will be what it is today, and many, many more conflicts that we see. We need to, therefore, rethink what have we done wrong. How could we, as we travel the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, try and walk a different road? I think we must also ensure that there's an understanding that peace is not just absence of war, but it is a holistic and inclusive concept that encompasses social justice, human rights, and sustainable development. True peace requires addressing the root causes of conflict with sustainable, gender-responsive solutions where women are central in shaping policies that promote long-lasting positive peace. Women need radical impatience so that they can be heard. Any whispering of the women, of women, any silence of the women in the room tends to amount to the women's voices, women's concerns being ignored. We are also supposed to focus on those issues that are very relevant for the sustainability of the journey for women, peace and security, the rising military spending and what that translates for women. The global military expenditure is now almost $2 trillion higher per year than a quarter of a century ago. That has to concern us. The Security Council, in theory at least, it is the epitome of where peace is being upholded. But let's look at the countries that are leading in the Security Council. They make arms, they sell arms, they profit from war. So there is a big challenge there that we face, and it is the elephant in the room that we need to address very seriously. It is detrimental to women, peace, and security. As we mark the 25 years, we also have to consider the threat of the breakaway of the multilateral system. Can we imagine a world without the United Nations, with a fractured United Nations that calls on us to do anything and everything we can do to protect these institutions that play a critical role in securing the peace? I would like to advance an argument for greater organizing within civil society. The voices of civil society in the face of countries that are making, selling, and benefiting from the war machine, the presence of citizens who make their voices heard, the people in countries that are at war who also have to stand up and challenge their government and the warlords in the environment that they live in, all need to unite and speak together. I don't know how it is like for you, but from what I've been seeing in the last few years, I have seen that there's less and less of the sisterhood that was there in the beginning of these 25 years. It feels like we are sort of falling apart instead of coming together. So there's a need for us to go back to the drawing board and work together again and rekindle the solidarity that we've had. The Secretary General of the UN asked us to think in this anniversary in a different way. And I think the women also in general in the world feel that this dispensation that we have, solid as it is, it certainly needs revamping. The Secretary General calls on the countries of the world to work harder on ensuring that we address the issue of military expenditure. He is calling on the countries to look at the participation of women in peace processes. He has called on the countries to address the increase of sexual violence that we have begun to see, especially in the last 5 years, and the number of women and children who are killed in conflicts has quadrupled compared to the previous 2-year period, just as we speak right now. Of course, the large number has come from Gaza. So this anniversary is not a happy one. It is an anniversary where we have to open our eyes and rethink the architecture and the implementation of the women, peace, and security agenda. And I think all of us here have a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Umzile, for giving us already quite some food for thought and discussion, I think. And thank you very much also to Heinrich Böll Foundation, to Emil Scholz, for opening up this discussion and creating this space. My name is Barbara Mittelhammer. I'm an independent analyst and co-creator of this Think Peace series, and I am particularly delighted that we have brought the thinking feminist piece from writing papers also to talking about it. And who would be better suited to have this conversation with than all of you, the experts we have here assembled on the panel and on the screen, of course, as well. So we have the next 90 minutes for the panel discussion to talk about exactly this question of rethinking the women, peace and security, the WPS agenda in times of backlash. And I think we've already heard why it's direly needed from you, Phumzile. So I think this question of how can we actually work on and talk about feminist peace is one that really moves all of us. At times when even binary conceptions of women's rights are under attack, when the international system, international law, and human rights globally are under attack and undermined from the very same actors who created the system. So it's really a dire state we're having this discussion in. And having this discussion and conversation in Berlin is also, I think, an interesting experience when Germany is also facing a credibility crisis of how to actually address feminist perspectives on peace. And as I said, who better suited to have this conversation with than the experts joining me here on this panel. I will briefly introduce all of them so you know which expertise we have assembled here. Joining us online on the screen, we have Ayak Choldengalak, who is a renowned women, peace and security expert and peace process support advisor at Inclusive Peace. She has extensive experience supporting inclusive political processes in conflict-affected regions, and she has worked with state and non-state actors, with civil society organizations, women coalitions, and youth movements in navigating peace processes and national dialogues in Sudan, South Sudan, in Ethiopia, and Eastern African regions. It's great to have you with us virtually. To my left, to my very left, maybe, starting in that order, we have Julia Kharashvili, who is the co-founder and chairwoman of the organization Consent, who are working to support internally displaced women in Georgia. And Julia's former Georgian government official, but also a member of the advisory group of the chairperson of the OSCE on WPS, Women, Peace and Security. And the NGO Consent was founded in 1995 and has been involved since in peace processes and confidence building in Georgia, also especially in the aftermath of the war in the early 90s. So it's great to have you here with us. To my left, we have Hannah Neumann, who is member of the European Parliament from the German Green Party. Hannah is member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Committee on Security and Defense, and also the chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with the people of Iran. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us, Hannah. We have already listened and enjoyed the expertise of Phumzile. We will hear much more on that on the panel. And to the very right, so to say, we have Jeanette Böhme, who is a policy and human rights officer at Medica Mondiale, which is an organization working to eliminate sexual violence globally. And Jeanette is also an expert in the network 1325, which is a coalition of civil society organizations here in Germany that actively support the implementation of women, peace and security and the women, peace and security agenda by the German government, and who are also campaigning for feminist foreign policy or feminist perspectives in policymaking. So we do have some time for a discussion here on the panel, and we'll later on also open up for questions from the audience. And I think my first question, which goes to all of you, we've heard a lot about feminist peace building, and maybe you can tell me in a word or in a sentence, what is your association? What do you understand when you hear feminist peace building? Jeanette, maybe you can start with you. Oh, you just talk in the microphone.
I think to me the key is really transformation of the root causes of war and conflict and of gender-based discrimination. And this is actually, I think, feminist policy is much more progressive than the agenda, women, peace and security, which we have. And transformation is for me really key.
Thank you.
I think for me, feminist peace building is more holistic. As we say, all the peace processes that were negotiated with women would last longer, are much more sustainable because of what women bring into it. They bring the feminist perspective that does not only care about the one side that the woman represents, but wants to see the total picture, so that everyone who is affected by the conflict is able to enjoy the peace. Women also think about not just the fighting, but they also think of the welfare of society, the health, the food, the jobs, the education. So it has a way of covering all of the issues that human beings will need.
Thank you. So with transformation and holistic, Hannah.
I would add agency and power by now, because for me, the Women, Peace and Security resolution is still far too often misused as a way to just speak about the protection of women. And for patriarchy, that's the easy thing. So we protect these poor women out there, you know? But the moment that women claim agency, that they claim power, that they want to sit on the table and really be part of the decision-making, women, minority group, LGBTI, that's when all of a sudden the men are really fighting back. But that's where we are stuck now. That we have all these women, and Sudan is to me one of the key and saddest examples that really have the bravery to take it to the streets, to challenge the power structures, to carry the revolution. But the moment that the actual cake of power is being distributed, they disappear again, and it's not because of the women that they disappear.
Agency and power.
Yes, so many good things already were told. For me, it's, yes, of course, it's sustainability and human security included in understanding of peace, but also it's equality that I see person on the other side as the same with the same needs and with the same opportunities. It should be the same opportunities, and I work for this opportunity that she will have it similar to me. I think it's very important. Solidarity for me is key.
Solidarity is, I think, beautiful conclusion for that. Now, all of this sounds very hopeful and very powerful, and I think that's a great starting point to pick up the script. No, I am very sorry. We have not yet heard from Ayak on your association on feminist peace building.
Thank you so much. I would say addressing the root causes of exclusion and recentering humanity and humanness. And then, of course, the classical freedom from want and need, in addition to everything else that has been said.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great addition to the picture. And all of this sounds very hopeful and very powerful. And then we've already heard in the keynote at the beginning a very glim picture of the state of the international arena when it comes to how to actually implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So one of my questions was actually, with whom can we work on women, peace and security credibly? And I was going to ask you, Phumzile, if the UN is still a credible actor, and taking from the keynote that you shared, you didn't give me a lot of hope in kind of state actors. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this perspective that you opened up in building different types of alliances and going in other spaces of agency, maybe.
The UN is still a very important actor. I think I would fear a world without the UN, but it is challenged. The ecosystem within which it exists is a very difficult one. So it has to fight for its survival. But then who is the UN? It's us, you know, because if you read at the Charter of the UN, it says we the people. So it's us who make up the UN. The structures and the way the UN runs, unfortunately, it's the survival of the fittest. If you just think of the countries in the Security Council that are the handful of permanent members, why would these handful of countries have the responsibility over all of us? That we have seen more and more have become more and more compromised. The need for Security Council reform is probably more clear now to everyone, that it just cannot go on like this. So yes, the UN, we need it, but we have to reform it. We have to change the way the UN works. And in the countries where we are, we need to speak much louder. We also need to rebuild the international solidarity that we've always had. I really worry about the way we seem to have pulled apart generally in the world.
Thank you. I think that's really something that is an urgent call to action on solidarity and on bridging the polarization. And maybe looking at a very different perspective of peace building, Julia, I would like to ask you, because your organization, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, your organization immediately started to mobilize and organize in an actually very active way of feminist solidarity with women and people in Ukraine, and you created this basically best practice example of what women, peace and security can look like. Did this also translate, or did the international community, international actors, so the OSCE or EU or Germany, pick up on the initiatives that you built? So was there an integration of the work that you did on the ground, or did then the diplomatic work happen very much in parallel? And do you see a window or a lesson that we can take from that on how to connect the grassroots with the imperfect but necessary international perspective?
Thank you. Question is quite comprehensive. I will try to be short, but I think it's very important that here on panel we have very different representatives from European Parliament, from UN. I still see like person with whom we were working during global study, and from German organization, and from grassroots organization like our IDP Women. And I think that solidarity really is a key word. Why we were so quick, and we were doing it not only with Ukraine, but during the Second Karabakh War, because we were trying to help to both to Armenian and to Azerbaijani colleagues. And I think it's one of ways what civil society can do, because even with all good intentions of donors, they need some time for mobilization, they need decision-making, they need some period how it will go, and if NGO can do it next day, it's very important. And I always try to use opportunities where people who are related with foundations on with fundraising or what else, to say that if each project will keep small amount of money for solidarity actions, money coming from NGO, which has the same experience and which is helping to women, knowing what you should to help, usually are very important also psychologically, but also this money can come the second, the third day after it's necessary and be really quick. And I want to add about support. Feminist policy which Germany was implementing during last years, of course, was extremely important, and we hope that it will continue, because it's not so many countries which now we can name, and the situation when BMZ was survived and is continue operation for us and for all NGOs working in situations of open conflict or frozen conflict is very important. Immediately when full-scale war in Ukraine started, Action Network, which was supported by BMZ, it's a global network which unites women in forced displacement, was making alarm and first statement, and then it was window of opportunity opening for Ukraine. OSCE supported our platform, Women for regional platform of women in peace dialogue, which provides opportunities for women in OSCE region from conflict parties to meet and to talk together. And even small contributions from this was very important, because OSCE is intergovernmental organization. UN is intergovernmental organization. Even in situation of backlash, they continue to stay accepted by all governments, because all governments are members of these organizations. And it's important to keep these organizations to be involved. And one word about EU, because EU for Dialogue had platform again in our region, which was very important for Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and all territories on this region, which was called agenda setting, and give the women the opportunities to set agenda and to see what is necessary. And women came themselves. We were not starting to talk about conflicts, but women came to women, peace and security because it was one of very important points.
Thank you very much, and I think you gave us a lot of points to jump upon and take it up on the panel with the other panelists here. And I actually want to pick up on the point of giving women the possibility to set the agenda. And I would like to ask Ayak. I think we have an issue with the video, but maybe that's just the screens here, or can we do something about it? Perfect, thank you. Because Ayak, you've spoken and worked on kind of flipping the script in the sense of bringing the approaches in peace building from power sharing to really the people-centered approaches, and really bringing in this this agency of women and strengthening them in their, not strengthening them, but creating processes that allow women to bring in their own agency, I would say. So maybe on that call that we heard on giving women the platform to voice and set the agenda, can you maybe tell us a couple of examples, or some examples on based on your work and experience on how women successfully maybe did flip the script and did set the agenda in these processes?
Yeah, women in the East African region, the Eastern Horn of Africa, have experienced quite a number of conflicts and political processes. And that also means that there has been a lot of space on the sidelines of these processes for conversations. And how, some of my work has been on accompanying the women in these processes, whether it's peace processes, whether it's ceasefire agreements, whether it's transitional justice processes or constitution-making processes, or even national dialogues. And so we see, for instance, women in Sudan really taking lead on addressing humanitarian issues, but also, maybe negotiating with the different armed groups on access to markets, providing legal aid for victims of conflict-related sexual violence, conducting monitoring, documentation, and reporting as well, open kitchens, and also really being the ones to decide whether families should move. And so engagement in especially, and forming broad-based coalitions on ending the war, whether it's Mansam, whether it's, no to ending war, ensuring that their presence in all these platforms, although not being invited to the formal processes, they have organized, they have made sure that their voices are reaching these tables, also using alternative media, working together with the youth to ensure that their voices are amplified. And it's the same also for South Sudan. You know, we've seen a situation where South Sudanese women have formed broad-based coalitions in spite of the political divide and the ethnic divide. And the elite divide. Women have organized and have made sure all the peace processes have had women signatories, have pushed for women as mediators to these peace processes, or co-mediators to these peace processes, have ensured that their quota systems and especially special temporary measures to anchor their participation, not just in the process, but also in the implementation stage of these peace processes. And if we look at Ethiopia, we've seen women, you know, as soon as the national dialogue was announced, immediately tap into the neighboring region and look, what can we learn from women's participation in national dialogue in Chad, of constitution and how women have organized? What is it? How can we learn? And then they came back to Ethiopia and immediately started grassroots consultations from Wareda level into consolidating a women's agenda. And so even before the National Dialogue Commission in Ethiopia you know, started their consultations, the women had already started consultations. They already had a criteria for inclusion. They already had clarity on how on the type quality of facilitators for these grassroots consultations. They already had an idea of how they wanted to ensure their consultation was engendered and their response and their contributions to this exercise was engendering. They immediately started identifying what other measures they needed to put in place to ensure that the outcomes of this national dialogue are transformative. And so the issue really is not that women have not known how to organize. It's women have organized in spite the challenges. And now with the global rollback on rights, on freedoms, and how the world is shifting, you know, the same. We also see the same symptoms in the region as well. But still, in spite that women are organizing. I mean, we've seen more exclusion. We've seen less adherence to peace implementation. We've seen countries stuck in perpetual transition. We've seen even rollback on provisions of inclusion for women participation in these political, especially high-level processes. But what we're also seeing on the other end is informal mechanisms, is more homegrown, more social-based, more local-based processes taking up, building on the spaces provided by the political spaces and trying to work on social peace at communal level.
Thank you, and I think that's directly, it's very inspiring and directly links to the agency and power that we heard about from you, Hannah. And I think this working on the implementation gap of the WPS agenda is something that you've been doing for a number of years, and I feel that's always the point where we get stuck. We do have so many great initiatives, powerful people working on peace, powerful women's initiatives and networks, and then somehow we fail to link them to the system, in parentheses. And I know this is a challenging question, but if you could change two things about how the EU tries to support agencies and initiatives that actually do this type of transformative work. Do you have one or two things that you could give us, that you would share with us on how the EU could do better to actually empower the agency or include the agency that is there?
when I listened to Fumsile, when you described how there was the cheering in the Security Council 25 years ago when the resolution was adopted, I was kind of calculating back in my head. I was 16 then. My youngest daughter is 15 now. And we haven't gone anywhere, frankly said. And as you said, I've been working on this implementation gap for many years. And 5 years ago, I was quite optimistic because I had the impression, so people got it, why we have to do it. So now, of course, it was a matter of priority. So is it like the most important thing or is it number 5 or 6? And people really wanted to do it, but they didn't really know how. So, but there you could explain, or they sometimes forgot it a bit on the way. But that's something I could work with. Like, okay, we have the same goal. I can help you. We can do this kind of project. We need longer funding. Maybe we need to check if unintentionally what is meant well is actually increasing the discrimination. I can give you examples on all of that. But it's something we can work with. And I was just thinking, okay, it's going too slow, but one step after another. And that in the last 2 or 3 years has drastically shifted. It has drastically shifted in the EU, it has drastically shifted in the UN, and it has drastically shifted on the ground. And that is what we are looking right now. And so it's not just 1 or 2, like, you know, we got to tweak here a bit, or we got to say like 80% needs to go into, it's really the drastic backlash shift that we're looking at right now. And we don't have an answer yet on how to deal with it. And to give you a bit of an example, for me, Afghanistan, where a situation where I worked on for more than 20 years, is kind of a bit of a case in point. So there was the fall of Kabul, Taliban took power. In their first statement, they said women can do whatever, but they will not be in politics. That was the moment for me where I knew like, okay, that is not going to work. And the European Union, I think, well-intentioned, sent a delegation to Doha to meet with the Taliban leadership there, to clearly send the message that it is super important for the European Union that women continue to have political positions, agency, everything. And they even celebrated that they had this mission with a nice picture and a tweet. By accident, and I truly believe it was by accident, the delegation that went was men only. So the moment they came back, I was like furious. Like, how can this happen? That's what I mean. And they were really apologizing because they really felt bad about it. They just hadn't had it on their agenda. They just didn't check. I mean, how can you not check? Okay, but still. So there was this whole discussion, what do we do? And I said, we have all these amazing Afghan women with these 20 years of experience on how to run things in Afghanistan, be it the education sector, be it minister for, I mean, not just women's affairs, but they had also ministers for a lot of other topics. Most of them are being in exile now. And we have these super difficult political questions on how to deal with the situation where we have the Taliban de facto in power. We don't want to work with them. At the same time, we want to continue humanitarian aid, continue to run women-led hospitals. How do we deal with all of that? So I said, why don't we create a network with these women that, if the Taliban may say they don't sit on the table anymore, but then we do a second table, and that one is more important for us in our decision-making. So they created the Afghan Women Leaders Network, and in the beginning it worked super well, because we really needed sparring partners for this difficult question. It was funded by the Swedish. The Swedish government changed. No one stepped in. The whole thing collapsed. And now, I even have to debate the why do we need this? And that is just one of the cases that we're looking at right now. And so on what would I love to see change? 2 things. One, the women that are in the institutions and that are in the system, and at the moment, sometimes it really sucks to be a woman in these institutions and these systems. I can tell you, please still try to stay. Because for every woman that leaves, there's one less there, and it's more difficult for the ones that stay. But let's not put all our eggs in the institutions' baskets. I think with the resolution Women, Peace and Security and everything that followed, we really thought we could change it through the institutions. I think we need a second track again. And I remember very well for the women in white in Liberia, that when the peace negotiations were stuck between all these different militia groups in Ghana that were in the nice hotel and they just enjoyed being in the nice hotels, where whilst the killing in Liberia continued, they marched to Ghana, they sat in front of this negotiation room, they held all these guys hostage and said, you're only gonna get out, get a swim and a cocktail and the food when you fix this shit. And later on, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was president of Liberia. So there was, by the way, one woman that really managed to stay in agency and power. I would not find everything perfect she did, but really that's one of these, we kind of forgot also these ways of functioning and working and civil disobedience, and maybe we need a bit more of that. I at least would be ready for it.
So keeping in power, staying in power, and being disobedient and resilient. I like these points. And because you mentioned Sweden, and because we heard about the need to still support these initiatives and the importance of Germany, you mentioned that in initiating those types of platforms. I want to look at you, Jeanette, because we are discussing in Germany, and we do have we had the abolishment of the feminist foreign policy earlier this year with this new government. And right now, Germany should be going through a process of defining a new WPS action plan. And we talked a little bit earlier and had this point of will we be even able to uphold the achievements of the previous WPS action plan. We weren't even discussing about kind of, can we still uphold the feminist elements that had been established over the past years. So maybe you can you give us a little bit of a from your perspective as kind of a civil society watchdog over the part of this network of civil society watchdog. What is your perspective on Germany's role and on the state of discussions of the WPS, or the perspective on supporting these processes?
Well, thank you. First of all, I think Germany is an important still political player at different levels. And we, especially as civil society, I don't only mean women's NGOs, but thinking of a broader concept and collaboration among civil society actors, we have to hold the German government accountable to its international legal obligations, because women, peace and security agenda is international law. It's not just a political concept. And also the German government is an important donor, and we see now funding cuts at the international level, but also at the German level. They will have tremendous impact, especially for women's rights organizations, women-led organizations, activists on the ground, and then, of course, beneficiaries, women and girls who are affected by armed conflict, who are affected by sexualized violence. And so I think it is really key that we hold our government accountable. The situation right now is that our the third National Action Plan ended 1 year ago, and we should have had a new one actually by the end of last year, but the process hadn't been started. There hadn't been any consultations with civil society. We were ready to provide input, to provide expertise, to engage in the process, but it just simply didn't happen. So now we kept pushing. Then the German government argued, okay, we are founding a new government and we get our policies in place and decisions have to be made. Still, it's an international obligation, and the current German government also made a commitment in its coalition contract to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda. The information now is that, well, the German government apparently plans to elaborate and publish its fourth National Action Plan earlier next year, but still there is no participation and consultation process in place. And I think one of the key conditions for national action plans to be also a useful and successful instrument is civil society participation and consultation. And it hasn't been outlined yet. And also it should be from an intersectional and feminist perspective. It should not just be participation of German civil society organizations, but really a broader global consultation process, which they did last time with the third national action plan. So we saw it is possible if there is political will and if there are resources. Also, like the implementation report of the last national action plan still hasn't been published, and that should be the baseline for the elaboration of like the next national action plan. We don't know what the findings and lessons learned are. So our call really is on the German government to initiate a broad consultation process, and then really to elaborate an impact-oriented, human rights-based, considering feminist principles, a national action plan which is strong, which is progressive, and which would be the foundation or the basis of Germany's implementation of the 1325 agenda. And in terms of impact orientation, there should be clear goals. I already mentioned consultation. There should be concrete measures. There must be indicators to measure impact and success. And of course, resources. Resources is the big issue. And if we don't have resources, then we already can imagine what happens or what won't happen and won't be implemented.
I think with resources, you struck a chord here, because that's also something that Phumzile mentioned very much at the beginning as well, as one of the elements actually on how the WPS agenda is eroding in a way the militarization and the shift of priorities. And if we think about the pillars of the WPS agenda, one of the key cornerstones was the prevention of conflict. It's of course about protection, it's about participation, but it's really about prevention of conflict. And this is something where I feel the international community is largely, and I think we have to be as frank, and you also gave us a lot of examples, failed in the past years. And there seems to be this shift of priorities towards militarized spending. Is there, Phumzile, still a way where you would see that through coalition building within feminist actors and agencies and networks, there is a way to shift these priorities? Or how do you think, where do you see an entry point? Or do we need to rethink things like fundamentally different? Do we have to, I don't know, start different educational systems and try to engage in schools and youth engagement? Or what is, do you have an idea on how to actually counter these militarist tendencies?
Well, I think we are in a phase where things have changed fundamentally. And we have to grasp that and not think that we can just tinker around the cracks. We really need to sort of gear up for a big push. And we do need to approach it from all quarters. Yes, we have to do something with the children in the schools. We have to do something in the communities. Governments have to do something. Women's movement, the feminist movement everybody has to think of the changes. And globally, we also have to stay connected so that we can all push in the same direction. I mean, so important is the global context. I don't know if any I'm sure some people in the room were in Beijing. Hooray. At that time, if you remember, the optimism was very high. The governments of the world, even though they were coming from a phase where they had neglected women's rights, but there was willingness to change. We had created that global context. And of course, some critical governments in Beijing brought positive energy. You remember that the US delegation was led by Hillary Clinton. That made a big difference. We were able to have a coherent, because we did not have one government to push against.
And Merkel was a German, and the women's ministry.
Thank you. I think we will also come to the audience in a second. It's a good reminder for everyone to already think about questions.
Yeah. So I guess let me make it short. So all these pieces gave us that moment. All these pieces that gave us that moment have broken apart. We are in another moment where we have to reassemble them and to give them purpose and direction. I can tell you, I am tired. You know, I really think it's bad enough to be a woman, really. It's bad to be a woman who also is black, because then you have to deal with those issues of racism. It's bad enough to come from a country that is struggling. So you are just fighting on so many fronts. Sometimes you just feel, will this ever end? You know, but we have no luxury of sitting back and giving up. We have to continue. Can you imagine if we were just to give up, what would happen? So.
And thank you for giving all of us, I think, a lot of inspiration to not give up. I think I do want to pick up on the question or on the point that you raised on we need, like everything is scattered. We really need to connect differently. And I would like to ask Ayak if you, from your perspective, can have experiences of regional collaboration between grassroots women's networks, or if you can even tell us about whether you have any examples of kind of practical feminist solidarity that you've experienced, or that you would actually call for, also with our expert from the network 1325 here on the panel, and maybe this could be already a starting point to create a new connection here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Honestly, I have to acknowledge what Phumzile said, Amandla, my sister, for your contribution. It really resonates. But just to say, yes, there's so many. There's many feminist solidarity initiatives that have happened either organically or intentioned. So at every point there have been peace processes. We've seen, especially on the Eastern Horn of Africa side of the world, women coming together. There was the Sawa Sawa Summit, which saw very high-level women at the policy-making level pushing for the South Sudan women's participation in the peace process. We've seen the Ethiopian women learn through peer exchanges during the Tigray conflict, learning from women from Sudan, but also women from South Sudan, learning from women from Liberia, learning from women from Rwanda, and coming together and forming a solidarity network where they're also brainstorming ideas. It's a space not just to bring your sorrows, to bring the heaviness that comes with operating in this space, but also to throw in your ideas, for further repolishing and re-strategizing and rethinking. And that has happened across the board. So this is not new. How feminist solidarity has shown up on the African continent, but in particular in the East. and Horn of Africa by reaching out across, to the other parts of the continent for experience sharing. So I remember when there was discussions on transitional justice in Ethiopia, we made sure that we brought women from Sierra Leone, Liberia, women from South Africa, and women from Rwanda to share what that experience had looked like. And that also helped then the women's coalitions in Ethiopia find ways of navigating their political landscape. The backlash is real, the authoritarianism is real, the nationalized patriarchy is very, very real, and the militarization. And I really wanted to just dip my toes into this militarization conversation, because it's also a menace, not just for the continent. And so even as we're thinking of rethinking the multilateral spaces, we also need to interrogate whether they have been feminist to begin with. Has the UN truly been feminist? It has not. If a handful of countries have veto, there is a hierarchy, and they get to flip the world upside down, then there is need to rethink the multilateral systems. There is also need to rethink peace processes beyond militarization and whitewashing of armed actors, and giving more agency to the social aspect and people in these processes that ultimately translate these political provisions into social norms that uphold societies and sustain peace. It is also about making sure that local-led, I hate the word grassroots, local-led initiatives, cultural mechanisms, women mediation, indigenous mediation processes, traditional customs and norms that have feminist values can be supported and can be mainstreamed into these political activities, and really beyond tokenistic inclusion of women. Women have organized, they have sought support, they have gotten solidarity from themselves, and the feminist space becomes the space where we all retreat to when we receive a lashing from the global context. So it is not about our spaces not being feminist or offering solidarity or being inclusive, but it is really the overall environment that we're operating in that has become truly a hostile. So the rethinking, I just wanted to add my voice to that conversation, that whilst we're rethinking, it is not to return things to the way they are, because the way they are were not working for us to begin with. The way they are was skewed, and the way they are created a hierarchy and a power imbalance, especially for the global South, and at the bottom of it all, women from the global South. But yeah, thank you so much.
No, of course, thank you. I think that's something that truly resonates, and I have to say it's really I think taking this as a not wake-up call, because we should all be aware of all of this, but I think it's a good taking stance of where we stand on this anniversary, leaving with much more anger, which always sparks action, I hope, in the end. When it comes to the connecting and maybe also the network aspect and the agency, but also the connecting with the power centers and then bringing things back to politics, because in the end that's something we need, right? We need both. We need the feminist action on the ground, but we also need to connect with the imperfect systems that we have to make it work in a way. I think it would be great to hear from your perspective, Julia, on how you connect the working on the protection aspect of the WPS agenda, which is still crucial and also not implemented at all of where we need it to be, and how you manage to connect the protection with agency at the same time, so that we actually manage to avoid this victimization of women and vulnerable groups in conflict.
Thank you. First, probably I will say that in our situation in Georgia, we have protracted conflicts and protracted displacement. And it's one thing which I wanted to bring to our discussions, that if it's even not hot phase of conflict, the conflict exists and women in conflict exist. And they are suffering, again, from consequences, and young people are suffering, don't understanding from what they are suffering, because protracted conflicts have their own dynamic. It's slow dynamic, but it exists. And new generation, which appear already after hot phase, they are a little bit different, and they differently understand it. So I think that I see here also young people, not so many, but I hope that transfer of experience and of knowledge, it's what we always try to do, it's using this intergenerational exchange, because it gives some opportunity not to lose what Fuzile was saying. Of course, we sometimes feel tired, but not really, because we need to continue. And yes, I think our women became already advocates. And 2 years ago, when we, together with young women, started to talk about new networks, and when we asked women and youth who were presenting how you would like to name your network, they told women and youth peace ambassadors. In situation of protracted conflicts, it's quite different notion, because you cannot have really quick solution of conflict. But it means that women are ready for long work. And when you do not have opportunities for direct political participation, which is now a case in Georgia, where quotas were abolished, some financial incentives which we were working for many years to adapt. And when I was listening to Janet, like I heard a Georgian case, because also our national action plan was completed last year, and we do not have yet new. And we are looking on any gap in legal system and on a loophole which we can use for increasing political participation, and for putting not our fingers but also our thoughts, and mainly to get some reply. In Georgian case, it's human rights strategy, which still is actions, and national action plan, which we will have 1 more year, and where civil society really contributed with women's inclusive participation and with women participation in negotiations, which we do not have for the moment really, and with some other things. But women in peace building continue to stay a very important thing. And one more thing which I wanted to add, that there are some, it's not so black, I will say. One thing that it's much less attention, and it attempts to close women's participations, women's agency, political participation. From my point of view, it demonstrates that women really achieved something. And we became, I will not say danger, but we became visible. And maybe it's why so many contra-actions were taken against women. And we need to use this opportunity. Each day, we need to use it, going from right, going from left, trying to convince, trying to be sometimes more creative and more, don't want really to say more, okay, let's say creative, and to use this, yes, and to use these opportunities which we were not using. I will say to use, thank you, I think more to use academia, because in Germany, it's possible. You have Free End network, which is working on this, and even not naming 1325, working on peace and development, you cannot do it without putting women on the first line. Using all possible events, we cooperate for many, many years with Broad for the Welt, and we see that they put under humanitarian. So now it's possible to talk about nexus, humanitarian, peace building, and women's participation. So what I think we need to use any kind of strategy and put inside of the strategy our strengths, and put women's participation, even not naming this, but promoting more and more women. Women who are bright and women who know how to do. And another strategy is to also to invite men and to talk with them convincing that we are not taking something from them. I don't know why they are so afraid of word gender. And we are not taking something from them. I don't want to take something from them. I want to have my place. I want to have my place and to include all on this place. And I think we need somehow to be more and more convincing. We need to work more each day.
Thank you on the convincing. Hannah, you do want to take something from men?
Actually, yes.
pass me.
I'm sometimes wondering whether this shyness, we are kind of cheating ourselves and we are taking away some of the power we could have. Because frankly said, if there are 70 seats in the Defense Committee of the European Parliament, I want to take some of these seats and give it to women. I'm sorry to say, there are only 70 seats, and if there are 4 women and 66 men, yes, I want to take some seats of that. And why don't we just say, okay, guys, I don't have a problem with men, but I have a problem when it's only men. And when it's only men, I got to take some men out and put some people of color and some women and some whatever in there. And it's a totally legitimate claim, and why can't we make that anymore? What happened to our movement? I earlier this year, out of this tiredness and frustration with how also we are having this debate, I printed a tote bag. I should have brought more. The tote bag says, if you want peace, prepare for war with the patriarchy. And yes, I mean, the looks and the discussions that this thing brings, that's what we need. Just like, why do we always just need to accept the status quo and just be like, I'm not going to take anything from you, I want to be so nice. No, it's just like, fuck off.
Thank you for being frank about it. And I think a lot of heartfelt frustration and experiences.
I can also answer a proper question now.
No, I mean, that's, well, but we've been talking about war with the patriarchy at the Defense Committee at the European Parliament. So I think one of the elements of also the militarization and the discussions that are being had at EU level, of course, there is also the complexities of the specific roles of the EU Parliament when it comes to foreign and peace and security policy making. But I feel something that has been reverberated here is also the idea of accountability for states and for policy making when it comes to WPS. So is there a window or a political appetite in the EU Parliament to do that?
My assessment by now would be there is, on this whole women, peace and security, gender equality, feminist policy, give it the label that you want to give it, but this whole thing. There is like 25% of people who truly believe this is a good thing and we need to keep it going, and no matter what, they will keep it going. Then there's like 50%, they are just pure opportunists. And then there are 25% that really think it's stupid. And until like 2 or 3 years ago, we had the pure opportunists in our camp. So these were the people that they said, okay, well, I have to do it, explain me how to do it because my hierarchy wants it and it's like fashion and now we're all going to do it. And they are now flip-flopping. So they are because of the Trump and the Putin and the big guys, and now we can be like the assholes again and we are not going to be held accountable and it's cool and we actually get applause for that. We lost them, and that is, for me, mainly what changed. So if they don't even care, how can I hold them accountable? And that's the problem that I have, and just like convincing and talking would also be a bit of the challenge, and that's why I said, really, we need to be more clear in our demands. I would be happy if we could just go and talk about science. I mean, science, we have all the scientific evidence on our side. Seriously, we have all the common sense of our side, but it doesn't get us anywhere. So I really think we need to be a bit more outspoken, a bit more creative, go into civil disobedience again, be provocative, and just claim it. What, for me, in terms of accountability, helps much more when I just take the space, when I even open the space and give it also to someone else who isn't there, and I just claim it, and then I say, okay, and now just tell me why I can't do that. And you mentioned with that little smile, and it's just a very tiny example, that I'm the chair of the delegation for relations with the people of Iran. Of course, that delegation is named Delegation for Relations with Iran. But when I took the chairwoman role, I said, from now on, I will call this the Delegation for Relations with the People of Iran. And you know what? If you don't like that, go to the Conference of Presidents and tell them to issue a statement that I'm not allowed to do that, because I want to see who goes public to say, at the current situation with this regime, we want to have relations with this regime and not with the people of Iran as the European Parliament. Of course, no one does it. So I'm just like, okay, from now on, it's called like that. I have the letterhead, we have it on the website until I'm told otherwise. And I think that's how we can have accountability. Just reverse it, just claim it, what you think is yours, and wait and see what happens, because that puts them in the difficult situation and no longer us.
You see, and people are picking it up. I wanna ask you, Jeanette, and please already think about the questions and that you wanna ask our dear panel in the audience. But this element of accountability and being frank and claiming space in civil society, I think, is something that in Germany is currently being discussed a lot, because of course there is also the need to try to explain people who are in decision-making roles, who at this point are not listening if you tell them that you have a feminist solution of things, but they may be listening if you are talking about the women's rights situation in XYZ. And I'm not that I am calling this something that is to be accepted, but I feel this is something that I hear a lot on the current discussion of the feminist civil society here in Berlin, for example. It's also something that reverberates a lot in Brussels spaces. And I think globally, the question of how to frame messages, how to still stay in contact with the decision makers while not losing the bite and the teeth of civil society. Maybe you can share a little bit of your perspective of the 1325 network and how you are thinking about that.
Well, let me start with my organization, Medica Mondiale, because I think what is so crucial right now is to be very strategic, and what we are doing, and yeah, well, maybe instruments and strategies and approaches which we applied in the past may not work right now in this situation and not in the future, and we need to be creative. We need to think about the scenarios we have to deal with and what, like, strategies, successful strategies can be. And for example, we are currently working on our new advocacy strategy because, well, we have to do it, and we also have to think very carefully, like, where to invest our resources, which we have, because I think they are going to decrease in the future, or that's the fear, at least. Well, with the network 1325, I mean, it's an informal network, including about 20 organizations from very different fields, working in humanitarian aid, climate issues, sexualized gender-based violence, and we have been focusing on the implementation of the Agenda 1325 by the German government, and especially by the elaboration and implementation of national action plans. So, but also, like, this is a network that has no own resources. We have no official structure. We have no money. So we also have to think where to put our energy. And I think this is actually also something that we have to think about. Like, we have to look now at the process, what is going to happen, what the National Action Plan is going to look like, which we don't know yet. And then we also have internally to draw our lessons learned and think about, okay, how do we go on with the issue, and what are our approaches and strategies in the future. And I think, yeah, it's very, strategizing is very important. And again, I can't say it often enough, funding is so important. And you just said, like, or my impression also sometimes is that women and also women's organizations are often shy to actually well, aggressively is not the correct word, but like to really proactively advocate and lobbying on funding, and like really not just saying, well, our new national action plan needs funds. No, we really actively have to lobby and do the fundraising. We have to work also with the parliament on that issue, because otherwise I think if we don't do it, well, we will see where we may stand in 2-3 years, and we may have a very big problem and around the globe.
And especially adding to that, the anti-feminist funding, because we've been talking about the backlash as well, is huge in numbers. It's huge in numbers coming from the US. It's huge in numbers coming from Russia. And also, increasingly, we have in the EU our very own homegrown extreme numbers of anti-feminist financing. So this is also something extremely worrisome that I think plays into not only the militarization, but also that element. I am looking at you, dear audience, dear people in the room, because this is the time to ask questions. Please lift up your hands, and then we will collect questions. Please be as short as possible so that as many people as possible can ask questions. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we will collect and come back to the panel. Yes, please. And if you please briefly state your name or institution, and we have a microphone coming your way. I think try again. I think that, or there is a new microphone coming your way.
Yes, now it's working. Perfect. Thank you so much. My name is Caroline Tunje, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Oxford. I have a question on the implementation of the WPS agenda. So I think you've talked a lot about the challenges, the structural challenges, the gender backlash, and a lot on what to do best strategically, which I think is super valuable. I'd just like to use this space that we've come together for also to dream a bit about the future. And so my question would be to anyone who would like to share something about it. Imagine you have all the power, all the resources, and think about your context within which you work on the agenda. Is there a project, something you would like to realize? How would you like to implement the WPS agenda in your context if you had all opportunities and no challenges? Thank you.
Thank you for some inspiration. We have, I think the second question was here in the third row or second row.
Ursula Schäfer-Preuß, UN Women Germany. I've been in development cooperation for many, many years, and also a fighter for feminist policy, for feminist peace policy. And well, I think we should not be so pessimistic. We have done a lot together. There are still resources. You can even do more with less. And I wonder how we really can gear up, what Fumsele has said, to move on with all what we have so far achieved and look ahead and really go on. I think we have to speak up loudly, and we can do more, and that would help a lot. Don't be too pessimistic, please.
Thank you for that optimism and the call for gearing up and building upon achievements.
I'm Eva Christoph, former member of the European Parliament and founder of the Greens and the Böll Foundation. So I'm part of the very, very old early feminists of the 60s and 70s. And I'm so happy that Fumsile seems to be rather near to me and my generation. So I have been in the anti-apartheid struggle too, and I remember your speeches and your work a lot. And I thank the Böll Foundation that you have arranged that meeting to give me this little birthday of 25 and 30 years. And I think this little remark of you for me is important, that you made the link between Beijing and that resolution. And in that situation, how you described what is going back with Trump, Putin, and Islamists and war and the IT hate campaigns and anti-feminist campaigns, I think like you said, from Georgia too, where are maybe spaces, like you from South Sudan, spaces of daily work, but maybe of work of better coordination, better specialization, and better alliances. And so my question would be, maybe we should feel globally and know a lot globally, but maybe for our political action in that, we have to learn to work more regional. That means I would be interested, what is the regional cooperation of the network? I have been in for a while on 1325 within Europe. What is regional possibilities within African regions? And what is the possibility in your region? And then maybe, Hannah, you know, if there can be something like what your idea was with Afghanistan. You see, if you just say, women should be more included, but there are many parliaments where there is not one woman in it, or in Iran, you know, what type of women are sitting in the parliament in Iran. So for Islamist countries, what is the solution for women participation in parliaments or political concepts for our common struggle in Islamist countries?
Thank you for the question of regional platforms, and I do think the struggle of women inclusion is very much a global one indeed, and relevant for any contexts, religions, and countries and regions. I think we had one question here and then over there, and then we are coming back to the panel for a closing round. Here in the middle was still the penultimate question.
Hello, I'm Sabrina. I work for the Embassy of the Principality of Liechtenstein, and as you see, quite young. And this would be a more personal question, not so theoretical, but I tend to struggle these days with, as you as well, like with frustration. And I see lots of anti-feminist movements also coming from my generation, from women, or like the female gender. And I was wondering, maybe you also had that while you were standing up for your rights. Maybe that was also a thing later in the days, I don't know, with like women also, I don't know, fighting against their own goods because of whatever influences there are out there. And I was wondering if you could give any tips on not how to convert those women, but bring them back to our side and, yeah, try to make this generation work again.
Sisterhood and activism. I think one question over there, and then I think there was the round.
Thank you very much. My name is Sia Vaisheshke. I'm from the Global Unit for Human Security of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Vienna. Thanks, by the way, for all the inspiring points. I have one point that I want to kind of bring it back to Hannah about. I mean, it of course is music to my ears, of course, because of course we were stuck in a situation where the institutions that we're working in that don't necessarily in their formats and formulations don't allow us, I say, I mean, I have to be I'm very much aware I'm a cisgendered man speaking in this, about this topic, but of course the fight for, as a feminist, I consider myself a feminist, so I'm just saying that in this, when you say civil disobedience, it's great, but I'm not sure, I'm just wondering how much the people, women or activists within the global north can actually learn from activists, women who are working as an intersectional, and understanding it as an intersectional fight in the global majority, and the experience they have of not having the luxury of institutions for decades, and actually fighting for their voices to be heard and fighting for their spaces through different means. And instead of actually increasing regionalization, how do we create learnings that are not one way, actually both ways? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think with that question, we're going to come to a kind of closing round. There was a lot to pick on. We had the dreaming about which would be your dream project. We had the how to gear up and build on achievements. Where are spaces for alliances and the regional perspectives? We had the sisterhood and activism, and then the linking civil disobedience with reflecting privileges and how to structure these things kind of in a dual way perspective. I would just ask all of you to maybe either pick on your favorite question or your favorite aspect of the questions, and then we're going to come to a closing round. And Ayak, if you would like to kick us off and share a little bit on your perspectives, when you've already actually shared a lot on regional perspectives. So I think there is a lot that you've already told us, but whichever... Yes, I think concrete cooperation was exactly what we heard a lot already, but there might still be more that you would want to share, and whichever you want to pick up on.
I do want to speak on the regional aspect, actually, and now this is to speak on the IGAD, the regional economic communities of the African Union, and all the other instruments, as well as the AU, and that is, we have regional action plans, on WPS. We have the Continental Results Framework. We recently also worked on a policy framework for women's participation for all AU-led and co-led peace processes. So there is a lot of collaboration that is happening. We just also concluded the regional consultation on evaluating WPS implementation for North, East, and South Africa. What's remaining is Central Africa and North, West, South Africa, and East Africa. So what's remaining is Central Africa, and taking note of the emerging issues, of what the gaps are, of what the lessons are. New challenges. Migration is back on the agenda. Violent extremism, but the climate issues, militarization for sure, the role of tech. So many issues that are manifest differently on this side of the world. But also another thing, and one of the gains and one of the key highlights, I was facilitating one of those consultations, was realizing that even countries with no NAPs, with no, countries like Libya, for instance, were doing so much work at national level, at local level, without having official mainstream existing frameworks on WPS. And so that what we've seen is that there's also so much being done in the informal spaces. And so one of the conversations was, how do we give more agency to the informal spaces? How to ensure these informal spaces are more mainstream and have gravitas and weight and influence and more credibility. But just to cap it off, with what one of the sisters spoke about, which is the anti-feminist rhetorics coming from women. Patriarchy is a system. Women, as the majority of the population, also make up the bulk of.
Sorry, Ayak, we do have a sound issue, I think. We lost you? No, maybe our technicians can check in on that. It's the connection. Maybe if you try to switch off the video and then we could hear your sound. Can we try that?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it works. Maybe we use that as an interim solution.
Right. So for me, it's. I think I just wanted to add on the fact that the anti-feminist rhetorics are an issue of patriarchy and not an issue of men or women or other. And so, as the majority of the population, of course, women also uphold the system, and I think it would be unfair to call out women as the problem when it comes to anti-feminism. I think for us, it's really to look at peace as a feminist issue, peace as a resistance issue, and that there can only be true transformation if the type of peace is a feminist peace. And I think that's a good point of departure.
Thank you, and I think that's an excellent point to make at this stage. Then, Julia, would you like to kick us off here?
Yes.
I was mentioning some regional networks, and I think it's extremely important. Till now, for Europe, it is European regional EU action plan on 1325, but it's not OSCE action plan, and we still are looking for a regional plan of OSCE, and OSCE now is trying to work, and UN Women is trying to work. But I think the main is when grassroots women are doing, and what you was mentioning, this cooperation and this solidarity across the boundaries and across the borders. I think what we can do all together is widen a little bit also national borders and boundaries, and to have opportunity and to increase opportunities for women to cooperate more, because regional approach, we have this network, Women for Peace Dialogue, which was created after the first Ukrainian war in 2015, and we still are working together, and still there are women from also for conflict parties now, and we can have dialogue, which is very important now. For instance, we will discuss what happened the day before in Latvia when they abolished the ratification of Istanbul Convention, and we see it like very bad sign. But we need to discuss, we need to do joint action, of course, and grassroots level women should be, I will not say such words like empowered, etc. We know all these words, but they need to show their importance, and we need to stay behind civil society and keep them to be negotiators, to be implementers. It's very important. One thing which I wanted to mention, it's recently after General Assembly meeting, it was published draft of amendments to General Recommendation 30. Like CEDAW, it's legal document, and all our government ratified it. And GRs are obligatory for government. This document is open for comments until 9 of December. We all can contribute, and especially networks and regional organizations, and simply women's group and separate groups can contribute. And I also we try in all our networks now to talk about will it be militarization, will it be climate change, will it be illicit of small arms and likes weapons, all these things which are not implemented, for instance, to try to put it from women, peace and security also to CEDAW and somehow to influence this. And one more thing to you, because I think it's very important that young people are usually more rational, and they want to have immediate profit from something. Immediate result, not profit, but immediate result. And work for peace usually is very slow work and not always visible. It's one step forward, 2 steps back, and then you need to go. You need to show this perspective. I can tell you that in Georgia, which is mass protests mainly by young people, young women, young girls are a very important part of this. And young girls are talking about peace and about democracy, and it's very important. And I think that bringing of knowledge and agenda of women peace and security and youth peace and security really to youth and showing what it gives them, it's one of the ways. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hannah, I think there were a couple of questions directly addressed to you.
Yes, I'm going to take 3. I'm going to end with a dream question, because I like that thinking a lot. But maybe first one with the women in the Islamist countries. You might be surprised that most of the Islamist countries have gender quota for their parliament, something that people here tell us is impossible to do. They by the way, also have equal pay, which conservatives here tell us it's impossible. Yeah, but so there is. But some of the feminists are in prison, some feminists have been released. But what I think is important, and there we may have a difference, and it's something that makes me especially struggle in the last 2 years, that we sometimes, even in our women, peace and security, feminist movements, start to accept and even redo this divisive language and rhetoric. We have 90% of a struggle in common. in this movement, and we differ on 5%, on 10%. And Gaza was the breaking point on this one, and I'm actually quite surprised no one brought it up. I was waiting for it, so I could say this. And it's very sad and frustrating for me to see how for me, the core of a feminist foreign policy and a feminist movement is, one, to name injustices when you see them, no matter who commits them, and two, to accept that there are different perspectives and realities on the world and make the attempt to deal with this in a constructive way. And I think we have failed on both. And this has weakened us, and it was the perfect gift we could make to this whole backlash discussion. I have so many Arab feminist friends, be it in Iraq, be it in Saudi, be it in UAE, be it in Yemen, that it became so difficult to work on our joint projects because of this divisive rhetoric that was coming from the outside, but that we also internalized to some degree. And I think we can only survive this current backlash if we go back to, let's walk the 90% together that we can walk together, and then see how we deal with the other 10%. And the fact that the Saudi regime is problematic, the fact that the UAE regime is problematic, for me does not diminish the personal struggle and achievements that these women have to go through when they show their face in parliamentary debates, when they have their face shown on the newspaper headlines, when they internally fight that they can lead delegations. When I was chair of the delegation for relations with the Arabian Peninsula, which I was the last term, I was leading these delegations. And at the end of the 5 years of my term, the UAE delegation was led by a woman. And you know what she said? If Hannah can do it, I can do it too. UAE women are no less good than they are European women. And they also have struggles. And I think we should not diminish those. On your question with learning from others, well, I mean, Gen Z just brought down 2 governments, right? That's the kind of power Fridays for Future here really dreams of. The good thing is, I think in the younger generation, they actually learn from each other. For them, there is not this kind of hierarchy that somehow we still tend to have in our brains. And I think especially, as you said, when it's about civil disobedience, about creativity, actually it's kind of the reverse one, because they are not, there's still a lot of, and I mean, we heard these amazing examples from Ayaka and others, where just because there is no institutions, because you cannot rely on institutions, you take things into your own hand, and there are so many more good examples. And now the dream question. So if I could have like everything, right? So first of all, I would burn all the weapons on this world. All the weapons. I would just burn all the weapons that there are on this world, and then I would just reverse the actual quotas on representation, on funding structures that we have right now, just for 20 years, and then ask the people which version they like better.
Thank you for some inspirational thinking here.
I'll just answer one question, maybe, the dream. I would take the money that is being used in militarization back, so as to slow down the conflict as we see it, which militarization contributes to. And we would have more money for many of the things we're talking about, because basically the women's agenda is broke. We could use all the money that is available to do much more than we are doing now. Then the last thing that I think would be important for me is really to deal with the issue of representation of women in all these places where these decisions are being made, because the absence of women's voices in many places where this critical Security Council, in our countries, etc., the absence of women's voices is what takes away the input that is very relevant for the changes that we want.
Thank you for pointing out these important things. Jeanette.
yeah, there's not much left to say because you already mentioned so much what I had in mind as well. Maybe like from our perspective, I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I would really work on overcoming root causes of gender-based discrimination. And therefore, I think what is important is to apply a multi-level approach. Like really, is it like if you deal with SGBV or with participation, you have to have, well, an approach that addresses the individual level, family, community levels, but also state institutions, and then up to the political level and peace processes. And I think this is what we are lacking. This is like the approach which my organization works with. But very often you get like funding for maybe a program or a project to provide direct services to survivors of sexualized violence, which is super important, but you need to make the connection. You need to work on all these levels in order not to overcome discrimination, to really ensure the fulfillment of the rights of survivors. And I think this is, and you have to do it in the long term, with a long-term approach in order to really have an impact and to change structures and the underlying problems, actually.
Thank you also for the long-term perspective, I think, which is very much needed. With that, we will only close the panel discussion, not the entire discussion, because we will be able to continue the discussion outside. There will be, I think, drinks or there are already, I can see them, drinks and snacks. So please do stay. Thank you so much, first off, to all of the wonderful panelists, being very inspirational.
Thank you for great facilitation.
And I do also want to mention that this entire Think Peace effort is a team effort. And I want to also thank very much Vera Beneta and Philipp Straub. I want to thank Simon Ilsen-Siavashashri. And I also want to thank Deria Binishik, so from Heinrich-Böll Foundation and the respective teams. So with that, nothing stands between us and the informal discussion part.